20 years ago, at a Northwest Blacksmith Association conference that Cy Swan and I were attending, I met a man named John Adolf. John Adolf was born in Germany prior to World War II. At the beginning of World War II, he was shipped, pretty much against his will, back into Soviet Russia when Germany and Russia were allies. At age 15, behind the Soviet Iron Curtain, their association flipped, and the Allies are now adversaries, and John's trapped. He escapes. He makes it back to Germany. The war's over. He serves a 6-year apprenticeship in northern Germany and learns to blacksmith in the old school way, and then he immigrates to the New World. He ended up in British Columbia, Victoria, Vancouver, and he became the most remarkable man in terms of how he has applied a wizard-level mastery of metalwork and blacksmithing and welding and flame bending and machining that I've ever met or heard of. It is my privilege to introduce you to my friend, John Adolf. Here are the 8 things that I've learned from John Adolf. Number 1, I learned that a 150-pound, 76-year-old man can forge a set of log tongs like this in 2 hours with an 8-pound hammer like this. I watched him do this in person about 6 months earlier than the video you're watching right now.
Said when he was taking heat was they used to use the coal fire, get a heat, place the end, but here you got the heat right where you want it, fast.
It was 2006, I think, at a Northwest Blacksmith Association conference in Washington, and I was there, as I mentioned, with my blacksmith mentor and friend, Cy Swan. John blew me away, and I took notes of everything that I could during all of his demonstrations. And he did 3 separate demonstrations. Now, about 2 weeks after we got home, Cy and I got together right here at this shop to try to forge an identical set of tongs to the ones that John had forged earlier. I had my notes, we had our passion for the craft, and it took us both working together about 6 hours, as I recall, to make these tongs. Now, I've used these things several times over the years. I've got other sets, but these work great. Now think of this. Just like you're watching him do in Wisconsin, all the time that he was forging these tongs, he kept up a steady narrative and a banter and an instruction of growing up in Germany, his time as a 15-year-old boy behind enemy lines in Soviet Russia, his escape, his 6-year apprenticeship to a blacksmith in northern Germany after World War II. His story included his immigration to Canada after the war and his most amazing career. Every man there was spellbound. And to top it off, he forge welded the rings using lime for flux and a rosebud for heat, with 150 blacksmiths watching every move. Now, the second thing that I learned from John was in his second demonstration, and I learned a term that was new to me: carbon migration. It speaks to the importance of preheating thick steel sections and the impact of preheating the steel on the weld when you're arc welding.
You have to go, you got to know the chemical analysis of the steel, so now you're going to get your carbon equivalent, and when you got your carbon equivalent, that will give you a range of preheat from 200 to 300 degrees. Once your carbon equivalent is 0.40, now you're going into 500. Once your carbon equivalent over 0.45 or 50, now you're going to 600 or 700 degrees preheat.
He distributed a slick little ready reference pocket guide that he had authored years earlier for welders and fabricators. And I learned that he was authorized to do this because he served as a director of the Canadian Welding Society, Canadian Welding Institute. I've got the document here someplace. For 25 years, designing, authoring, and administering many welding processes and testing guidelines, and teaching them all throughout Canada. The third thing that I learned from this man was that a burning passion for hard work, coupled with curiosity and confidence, can take a blue-collar man to the very top of his craft, and that it takes real wisdom to identify the right opportunities when the opportunities begin to show up. I learned that a man can use heat and cold to bend steel without ever touching it. It was his third demonstration of flame bending. It was astounding. John became a master of flame bending techniques and demonstrated these magician moves in colleges and trade schools all over Canada. Just about a year ago, I tried it right here in this shop, and I had some success, and I had called him, and he coached me, and he has amazing stories, and the pictures and diagrams and certificates to prove them. He was able to solve unsolvable problems with humility and grace. Several of his stories, in sort of an offhand way, began with reciting phone calls that he received or that his employer received, where somebody on the other end would have a big problem with bent steel and would say, "John, can you help us?" And he would say characteristically in his beautiful accent, "Well, I don't know. We will see what I can do." Now, when I visited with John and Patricia at their house in British Columbia, Vancouver, on the mainland, a little town that they don't live in anymore. They've moved to be closer to his daughter. The fifth thing that I learned is that a 70-year marriage that is vibrant and radiates love and mutual respect is possible, and it's beautiful. Now, all through my visit with them, in their kitchen, it was clear to me that they had grown into a man and a woman, a husband and a wife, fully integrated. They had become a single organism, deeply at ease and still in love with each other. What an accomplishment. And I will just say this, that in an email not long ago, like 3 months, John mentioned to me that Patricia is now dealing with a dire health challenge, but that he's going to continue to look after and care for her as long as he is alive. That's something I never want to forget. The sixth thing that I learned from John at that conference is that the art component in blacksmithing, which was intimidating me, can remain based in reality. It doesn't all have to be abstract or subjective. And as blacksmiths, we don't have to worry about finding our unique style because it will find us. And I learned to have confidence that the craft is equally at home in small, delicate pieces as it is in big, bulky, practical gates and railings and tooling. Thank you for that, John. The seventh thing that I learned is that raw ambition and enthusiasm and courage and curiosity and a friendly outlook will compensate for any adversity or lack of opportunity. John's story is so inspiring. And I learned that other men besides myself are also sometimes confused at how to explain how they learn to do some of the things that they can do. John told me that sometimes he would wake up in the morning having had answers to his problems and new knowledge come to him while he was sleeping. I've had that. You've had that. It's a wonderful characteristic of living and solving problems and being productive. The eighth thing, and maybe the last thing that I learned from John, is something that I've also learned from Cy. And it's that passion and a thirst for knowledge and a hunger for the work itself will keep you young. That a strong man can age gracefully, and that reluctant concessions to the advancing years might be a tactical retreat, but they are not. They are the furthest thing from a defeat. Well, of all the videos that we've made over the years, this has to be one that has given me the most satisfaction. It has also taken the longest. It was 2 years ago that I talked to Bob Bergman, and he inspired me to move forward, and it was 1.5 years ago that I visited John, and since then it's been staring me in the face, and I've been wrestling with how in the world do I reduce a life like this to a video like this. But before I say one more thing, I want to thank the Upper Midwest Blacksmith Association and Roger Degner for allowing me to use their video footage that they captured so long ago in Bob Bergman's shop. Thank you, Roger. And I want to thank Bob Bergman, who has become a friend, and he encouraged me to pursue John's story. Thank you, Bob. Now, one of the greatest blessings of my life has been the older men that I've met and been taught and inspired by. Their impact has been utterly immeasurable, including the 3 short days of the conference that I spent listening to and watching John Adolf. So, young men, here's what I want you to remember if you don't remember any other thing. Respect your elders. And when a Renaissance man, when a giant crosses your path, stick to him like a burr. Now, don't be surprised if he is slow to engage. He doesn't have enough time left to waste it on some young guy who might squander it. And if he's not socially adept enough to actually pass on his knowledge, don't resent him for it. He is, after all, like the rest of us, merely human. But when you find him, or them, make sure that you make his life better for having turned you into a better man. Thank you for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.